I never imagined I would wake up married to my sister's comatose fiancé. The wedding was a cold business transaction, my family facing financial ruin, and Liam Harrington lying unconscious in a hospital bed. I was the sacrifice, the forgotten daughter, finally useful for something. My sister Vanessa was furious when she returned from abroad. Her perfect life plan shattered by my arranged marriage to her wealthy fiancé. But as I cared for Liam day after day, reading to him, talking to him, watching for any sign of consciousness, something unexpected happened. I began to care for this stranger who was now my husband. When Liam miraculously awoke with amnesia, everything changed. I had to pretend to be the loving wife while helping him recover, all while Vanessa schemed to reclaim her place by his side. The connection between Liam and me grew stronger each day, despite his missing memories. Then I discovered the truth. The car accident wasn't an accident at all. The financial documents hidden in his study, the medication being tampered with, my sister's desperate attempts to keep him from remembering what really happened that night. Now I'm racing against time as Liam's memories begin returning. Will he remember that Vanessa tried to kill him before I can protect him? Will he believe that my feelings, despite our arranged beginning, are real? Or will my sister's murderous plot succeed this time, eliminating us both? Buckle up, get ready, and subscribe for a special surprise tomorrow. I sat at our worn kitchen table, hands trembling as my father delivered the news. Our family business was bankrupt. 6 months of unpaid bills had piled up, and the bank was foreclosing on our home. The lifeline we had been counting on, my perfect sister Vanessa's engagement to billionaire Liam Harrington, was now in jeopardy. "There's been an accident," my mother said, her voice hollow. "Liam's in a coma. The doctors don't know when or if he'll wake up." I watched my parents exchange that look, the one they always shared when calculating the value of their daughters. Vanessa, the golden child with her dazzling smile and business degree, had always been their investment. I was the backup plan, the forgotten daughter who lived at home helping with the family business while my sister jetted around the world. "The Harringtons are threatening to withdraw financial support," my father continued, "unless the marriage proceeds as planned." My mother's eyes fixed on me with sudden interest. "Elena, this is where you come in." The realization of what they were suggesting hit me like a physical blow. "You want me to marry Liam, a man in a coma, a man who's engaged to my sister?" "It's not ideal," my father admitted, not meeting my eyes. "But the Harringtons need this alliance secured legally. Vanessa is unreachable in Milan. We need immediate access to those funds or we lose everything." I thought of objecting, of pointing out the countless ways this plan was wrong. But years of being the afterthought, the daughter whose opinions didn't matter, had taught me futility. Still, I tried one last time. "This is insane. Vanessa will never forgive any of us." "Your sister will understand what's at stake," my mother said, though we all knew that wasn't true. "This is temporary, just until Liam recovers." 3 days later, I stood beside a hospital bed wearing an elegant yet cold white gown. The unconscious man before me was handsome, his face peaceful despite the tubes and monitors surrounding him. I had never met Liam Harrington before today, yet I was about to become his wife. His parents watched from across the room, their expressions a mixture of grief and calculation. Mrs. Harrington's diamond necklace probably cost more than our entire house. Mr. Harrington checked his watch repeatedly, clearly wishing to be elsewhere. "Do you, Elena Sinclair, take Liam Harrington to be your lawfully wedded husband?" The hospital chaplain's words hung in the sterile air. I looked at my husband-to-be, wondering what color his eyes were, what his voice sounded like, whether he would hate me when he woke up. "I do," I whispered, the words sticking in my throat. The ring was slipped onto my finger, too large and impossibly heavy. No one clapped, no one smiled. The marriage certificate was signed, notarized, and filed within the hour. "The medical team will brief you on his care," Mrs. Harrington said, her voice clipped. We've arranged for you to move into the east wing of our estate. You'll have access to the staff, but we expect you to personally oversee his recovery." I nodded, understanding my role in this transaction. I wasn't a wife. I was a caretaker with a legal title, securing my family's salvation through my service. That evening, I packed a single suitcase of belongings. My mother fussed over my appearance, suddenly concerned with how I presented myself now that I carried the Harrington name. "Remember, this is for all of us," she said, adjusting my collar. "The funds will transfer tomorrow. Your father and I can save the business. Keep the house." I noticed she didn't mention what would happen to me when Vanessa returned, when Liam woke up. Those complications would be addressed later, I supposed. The Harrington estate loomed like a fortress as the car approached through wrought iron gates, 5 stories of imposing stone and glass, surrounded by manicured gardens and a guest house larger than my family home. This cold palace would now be my prison. A stern-faced housekeeper met me at the entrance. "Mrs. Harrington," she said, the title sounding like an accusation. "I'll show you to your quarters and then to Mr. Harrington's room." I followed her through marble halls lined with portraits of Harrington ancestors, their judgmental eyes seeming to follow my every step. The east wing was separated from the main house by a long corridor, isolating me from the family. My room was luxurious but impersonal, with heavy curtains and antique furniture that belonged in a museum. Through connecting doors was Liam's medical suite, where he had been transferred from the hospital. Medical equipment surrounded his bed, monitors beeping steadily. When the housekeeper left, I stood beside my comatose husband, overcome by the absurdity and desperation of my situation. "Hello, Liam," I said softly, feeling foolish talking to an unconscious stranger. "I'm Elena, your wife, apparently." I took his unresponsive hand in mine, surprised by its warmth. "I promise I'll take good care of you, and when you wake up, we'll figure this mess out together." I quickly settled into a routine at the Harrington estate. Each morning began with checking Liam's vitals, adjusting his position to prevent bed sores, and assisting the visiting nurse with his care. The medical staff taught me how to perform basic physical therapy, massaging his limbs to maintain muscle tone despite his immobility. "Talk to him," the neurologist suggested during her weekly visit. "Coma patients can sometimes hear. Familiar voices might help bring him back." So I talked. At first awkwardly, then with growing ease as the days passed. I read him the financial news, assuming a business magnate would want to stay informed. When that felt too impersonal, I switched to novels I found in his study. "I hope you like classics," I said one afternoon, opening a well-worn copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. "This one looks like a favorite. The binding is practically falling apart." The Harrington household staff maintained their distance, treating me with cold politeness. I caught whispers when I passed, speculation about my motives, suspicions that I was a gold digger who had somehow engineered this situation. Only Martin, the elderly groundskeeper, showed me kindness, occasionally bringing fresh flowers for Liam's room. "He always loved gardenias," Martin told me. "Used to help me in the greenhouse when he was a boy, only member of the family with a green thumb." These small insights into Liam's character made him feel less like a stranger. I found myself studying his face, trying to imagine his expressions, his smile, the sound of his laugh. One day, while Liam's parents were away at a charity function, I decided to explore his study. Perhaps I could learn more about the man I had married, find topics he might enjoy hearing about. The room reflected its owner, elegant but not ostentatious, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a large mahogany desk facing floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden. I ran my fingers along the spines of his books, noting dog-eared pages and margin notes in a precise, angular handwriting. The desk drawers were mostly unlocked, containing business documents and correspondence, but the bottom right drawer refused to open, secured with a small keyhole. Curious, I searched the room but found no key. I was about to leave when I noticed a framed photograph on his desk. Liam stood beside Vanessa at some gala, both dressed impeccably. My sister beamed at the camera while Liam's smile seemed forced. I'd seen that expression on Vanessa's previous boyfriends, men captivated by her beauty, but eventually exhausted by her demanding nature. Had Liam felt the same? Was their engagement another of Vanessa's conquests? Or had there been genuine love? As weeks passed, I developed a deeper sense of Liam through his possessions and the stories shared by longtime staff members. He was known to be fair, but exacting in business, generous to charitable causes, and intensely private. Unlike the flashy socialite my sister portrayed on social media, Liam preferred quiet dinners to extravagant parties. Mrs. Harrington occasionally visited her son's room, watching silently as I read to him or performed his exercises. Initially, her presence made me nervous, but gradually her scrutiny softened. "You're good with him," she acknowledged stiffly one evening, more patient than the nurses were. It wasn't exactly approval, but it was something. Mr. Harrington was less involved, checking in briefly once a week, his visits clearly obligatory rather than emotional. I continued my exploration of the house when time allowed, piecing together clues about Liam's life. In the library, I discovered photo albums showing a serious-eyed boy who grew into a reserved young man. In contrast, recent photos with Vanessa showed her dominating every frame, Liam slightly withdrawn. My investigation took an unexpected turn when I overheard the chauffeur speaking to the housekeeper in hushed tones about the night of Liam's accident. Police reports said brake failure, but Mr. Harrington always maintained his vehicles perfectly, the chauffeur insisted. And why was he on that coastal road? He'd told me he was headed to the office that evening. My curiosity piqued. I began asking careful questions of the staff. Their answers revealed inconsistencies in the accident story. Liam had apparently called off a dinner with Vanessa just hours before the crash. He'd been upset, according to his assistant, though no one knew why. I returned to the locked drawer in his study with renewed determination. After a week of searching, I found a small key hidden in the false bottom of a decorative box on his bookshelf. Inside the drawer was a file labeled Vanessa Sinclair, Financial Discrepancies. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing spreadsheets, bank statements, and a half-written letter expressing concerns about unauthorized transfers from company accounts. Before I could process this discovery, the household intercom buzzed. "Mrs. Sinclair Harrington," the housekeeper announced formally, using the hyphenated name that emphasized my outsider status. "You have a visitor in the main foyer." I quickly replaced the file, locked the drawer, and hurried downstairs. Standing in the grand entrance hall, surrounded by designer luggage, was my sister Vanessa. Her perfect features were contorted with rage. "What the hell have you done?" she demanded, her voice echoing against marble walls. "You married my fiancé while I was away? How dare you betray me like this?" Behind her stood our parents, their expressions a mixture of relief and apprehension. The family reunion I had been dreading had arrived. Vanessa's voice carried through the mansion as she berated me, our parents attempting half-heartedly to calm her. I stood silent, letting her fury wash over me like I had done since childhood. "It was a business decision," our father finally interjected. "The Harringtons insisted on securing the merger through marriage immediately. We would have lost everything." "So you sacrificed Elena instead of waiting for me?" Vanessa spat. "How convenient." Mrs. Harrington appeared at the top of the staircase, her cool gaze assessing the scene. "Miss Sinclair, your theatrical display is disturbing my household. If you wish to stay, you will conduct yourself appropriately." Vanessa immediately transformed, her rage replaced by practiced charm. "Mrs. Harrington, I apologize for my outburst. The shock of finding my sister married to my fiancé was overwhelming. Arrangements have been made for your family in the West Wing," Mrs. Harrington replied, unmoved by Vanessa's performance. "Elena will continue as Liam's primary caretaker. That arrangement has proven beneficial to his condition." I returned to Liam's room, my thoughts in turmoil. The file I'd discovered suggested Vanessa had been embezzling from Liam's company. Had he confronted her before the accident? Could that explain why he was on that coastal road? That evening, as I was reading to Liam, the monitors began beeping erratically. His fingers twitched against mine and his eyelids fluttered. "Liam?" I whispered, hardly daring to hope. "Can you hear me?" His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then settling on my face with confusion. I pressed the emergency call button, my heart racing. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice raspy from disuse. "You're home," I answered gently. "You've been in a coma. There was an accident." The medical team rushed in, pushing me aside as they examined him. Mrs. Harrington appeared moments later, followed by her husband and, inevitably, Vanessa. Hours passed in a flurry of doctors, tests, and careful explanations. The verdict was both miraculous and complicated. Liam was awake but suffering from amnesia. He recognized no one, not his parents, not Vanessa, not me. "This is common with traumatic brain injuries," the neurologist explained. "His memories may return gradually or all at once. Familiar surroundings and routines will help." "I'll take care of him," Vanessa announced, stepping forward possessively. "As his fiancé, it's my right." The doctor looked confused. "According to our records, Mrs. Elena Harrington is his wife and has been overseeing his care." Vanessa's expression tightened. "There's been a misunderstanding. I'm his real fiancé. This marriage was a temporary arrangement." Liam watched this exchange with bewilderment. "Could someone please explain what's happening?" Mrs. Harrington took control of the situation. "Elena will continue as Liam's primary caretaker. She knows his medical routine and has proven competent. Vanessa, you may assist if Elena approves." The next days were awkward as I helped Liam relearn his life. I showed him photo albums, answered questions about his business, and guided him through the house. He was polite but distant, clearly uncomfortable with the strange woman claiming to be his wife. "How did we meet?" he asked one afternoon as we walked slowly through the garden, part of his physical therapy. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Through your business connection with my father," I said finally. "It wasn't a conventional courtship." "And Vanessa?" "She says we were engaged." "You were," I admitted. "But circumstances changed after your accident." He frowned, trying to piece together these contradictions. "I feel like everyone's hiding something from me." Before I could respond, Vanessa appeared on the garden path, elegant in a designer dress that made my simple clothes look shabby by comparison. "Liam, darling," she said, ignoring me completely. "The doctor said short drives might help trigger memories. I thought we could take the Bentley to our favorite restaurant." Liam looked at me uncertainly. "Would you like to join us, Elena?" Vanessa's smile hardened. "I thought it might be better just the two of us, to recreate our special moments." I recognized Vanessa's strategy. She would monopolize Liam's time, filling his blank memory with revisionist history that excluded me entirely. "Actually," I said with uncharacteristic assertiveness, "the doctor recommended maintaining consistent routines. We usually have lunch on the terrace this time of day." Liam seemed relieved by my intervention. "Perhaps another time, Vanessa." My sister's eyes flashed with anger, but she retreated gracefully, knowing this was only the opening move in her game. That night, as I helped Liam prepare for bed in the adjoining room to his medical suite, he suddenly gripped my hand. "I remembered something today," he said quietly. "Not a specific memory, but a feeling. When you were reading to me this afternoon, your voice felt familiar, safe." My heart quickened at his words. The doctors say that's a good sign. Your subconscious remembers things your conscious mind doesn't yet. "Who am I, Elena?" he asked, vulnerability plain in his expression. "Everyone tells me facts about Liam Harrington, but I don't recognize that person." I sat beside him on the bed, carefully considering my response. You're intelligent and fair. You value honesty. You're reserved but kind. The staff respect you, which says more about your character than any business achievement." He studied my face intently. "And what were we to each other? Really?" The question hung between us, complicated by truths I couldn't yet reveal. Before I could formulate an answer, a soft knock at the door announced the night nurse, ending our conversation but not the connection forming between us, fragile and unexpected. Liam made remarkable progress over the next few weeks. His physical therapist marveled at how quickly he regained his strength, though his memories remained frustratingly elusive. Each morning I helped him through his exercises, our routine evolving into genuine companionship. "You're much more patient than the therapist," Liam commented one day as I guided him through stretching his injured leg. "He pushes too hard." "You pushed yourself too hard yesterday," I countered. "I noticed you wincing." He smiled, a warm expression that transformed his serious face. "You're observant. I've had practice watching for your reactions." His hand covered mine where it rested on his knee. "Thank you, Elena, for everything you've done while I was unconscious. The doctors say your constant care made a difference." These quiet moments of connection were precious, islands of peace in the storm brewing around us. Vanessa had established herself as a constant presence, arriving each day with photographs, mementos, and stories designed to reinforce her version of their relationship. "Remember our trip to Santorini?" she would ask, showing him pictures of themselves on a yacht. "You proposed under the sunset. It was magical." Liam would nod politely, though he later confessed to me that nothing she described stirred any recognition. "It's like hearing stories about someone else's life," he explained as we walked through the garden one evening, a daily ritual we both cherished. "I feel I should remember being in love with her, but there's nothing there." I kept my focus on helping Liam recover, but I couldn't ignore the financial documents I'd discovered. While he napped each afternoon, I returned to his study, carefully examining the evidence of Vanessa's embezzlement. The amounts were substantial, nearly $2 million diverted through a complex web of transactions. One afternoon, Mrs. Harrington found me in the study, the files spread across Liam's desk. "What are you doing?" she asked sharply. I straightened, caught between truth and discretion. I was looking for information that might help Liam remember. She approached, glancing at the documents before me. Her expression changed as she recognized what I was examining. "You found his investigation into your sister," she said, not a question, but a confirmation. "Did you know about this?" I asked. Mrs. Harrington sighed, suddenly looking older. Liam suspected something just before the accident. He was gathering evidence before confronting her. And then he ended up nearly dead on a coastal road. We shared a look of understanding. Neither voiced the suspicion forming between us. "Why did you allow me to marry him?" I asked. "If you knew Vanessa might be stealing from him." The merger needed to proceed regardless of personal complications, and when the doctors weren't certain Liam would recover, securing his assets became paramount. She studied me with new consideration. "What I didn't anticipate was your devotion to his care. You've proven yourself more than a convenient placeholder, Elena." Coming from Mrs. Harrington, this was high praise indeed. Our relationship shifted subtly after that conversation. She began inviting me to join her for tea, sharing stories about Liam's childhood, treating me less like an interloper and more like family. Meanwhile, my own parents remained distant, clearly aligned with Vanessa's efforts to re-establish her position. I overheard them discussing how the situation would resolve once Liam regained his memory. "The marriage can be annulled," my father assured Vanessa. "He never consented, not really. You'll be back where you belong." My sister's response was cold, and Elena will go back to being nothing, as she should. Their words stung but didn't surprise me. I had always been the dispensable daughter, useful only when Vanessa was unavailable. What did surprise me was how much the prospect of losing Liam hurt. Somewhere between reading to his unconscious form and guiding his recovery, I had developed feelings for him, feelings I had no right to have, given our arrangement. One evening, Liam asked me to help sort through his office, hoping familiar objects might trigger memories. As we organized papers, our hands brushed, sending an unexpected charge between us. Liam paused, looking at me with an intensity that made my heart race. "Elena," he said softly, "I keep having this recurring dream. You're reading to me, but I can't open my eyes to see you. All I have is your voice, anchoring me to the world. Was that real?" I nodded, unable to speak past the emotion tightening my throat. He moved closer, his hand gently touching my cheek. "I feel like I've known you much longer than these few weeks. There's a connection I can't explain." "The doctors say coma patients sometimes form subconscious bonds with caregivers," I offered weakly. "Is that all this is? Because it feels like more..." Before I could respond, the door opened. Vanessa stood there, her expression darkening as she took in our proximity. "Am I interrupting?" she asked coldly. Liam straightened, his hand falling away from my face. Elena was helping me search for memory triggers. Vanessa stepped between us, effectively dismissing me. "I have something better." The neurologist suggested revisiting meaningful locations. "I've arranged for us to visit the restaurant where we had our first date tomorrow." As I slipped away, leaving them to their plans, I felt a fresh wave of uncertainty. Whatever was growing between Liam and me existed in a vacuum of his missing memories. When those memories returned, would his feelings change? Was I setting myself up for heartbreak by allowing myself to care for a man who belonged to my sister? And more urgently, if Vanessa had indeed been involved in Liam's accident, was he safe with her now? The questions plagued me as I walked the silent halls of a house filled with secrets I was only beginning to uncover. I watched from the upstairs window as Vanessa helped Liam into her convertible, her hand lingering possessively on his arm. They were headed to the restaurant for their memory date, and I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in my stomach. Mrs. Harrington appeared beside me, following my gaze. "You care for him," she observed. I didn't deny it. "I'm worried about him being alone with her, especially if she was involved in his accident." "The driver is instructed not to leave them unattended," she assured me. After our conversation, I took precautions. Relief washed over me, followed by gratitude for this unexpected ally. I spent the afternoon restlessly pacing, trying to distract myself by organizing Liam's medications and reviewing his therapy schedule. When they returned hours later, I watched their interaction carefully. Vanessa was animated, touching Liam constantly, while he maintained a polite distance. His eyes sought mine across the foyer, a silent communication that didn't escape my sister's notice. That evening, Liam requested I join him in the conservatory after dinner. It had become our nightly ritual to sit among the plants, talking about his day and any new memory fragments that might have surfaced. "Did the restaurant trigger any memories?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Nothing specific," he replied. "Vanessa kept pointing out details, our usual table, the wine we supposedly loved, the dish I always ordered. It felt like she was trying to program memories rather than unlock them." His perception surprised me. That must be frustrating. What's frustrating is feeling pressured to remember a relationship I'm not sure I want to resume. His directness caught me off guard. "Elena, there's something I need to tell you." My heart quickened as he moved closer on the bench we shared. All day with Vanessa, I kept comparing her to you. Her touch feels wrong somehow. Yours feels right. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining. "I know this is complicated by my amnesia, but I'm drawn to you in a way I can't explain." "Liam, He leaned forward, his lips meeting mine in a gentle kiss that quickly deepened with unexpected intensity. I responded instinctively, months of unacknowledged feelings surging to the surface. His hand cradled my face, and for a moment the complicated reality of our situation disappeared. We broke apart at the sound of shattering glass. Vanessa stood in the doorway, a broken teacup at her feet, her face contorted with rage. "You conniving little snake," she hissed at me. "I always knew you were jealous of me, but this, seducing my fiancé while he's vulnerable—" Liam stood protectively. "Vanessa, this isn't what you think. Isn't it? She's manipulated this entire situation, married you while you were unconscious, isolated you from me, and now she's taking advantage of your condition." Vanessa's voice rose hysterically. "What lies has she told you about me?" "None," I said firmly. "I've never spoken against you to Liam." "Liar!" Vanessa advanced toward me, but Liam stepped between us. "That's enough," he said with an authority that momentarily silenced her. "Elena has been nothing but supportive and honest during my recovery. I initiated what you just witnessed, not her." Vanessa's strategy shifted instantly, tears replacing rage. "You don't know what you're saying. You're confused. When your memory returns, you'll remember us, what we meant to each other." I slipped away during her performance, heart pounding with conflicting emotions. The kiss had confirmed my feelings for Liam, but Vanessa's interruption reminded me of the precarious nature of our connection. If she revealed the truth about our arranged marriage before I could explain, would Liam ever trust me again? The next morning, I found a small velvet box in Liam's bedside drawer while gathering laundry. Inside was an engagement ring, elegant and understated, nothing like the flashy diamond Vanessa had shown in their engagement photos. A note tucked inside read, "For when I find the courage to start over." The inscription inside the band simply stated, "To new beginnings." The date engraved was 1 week before Liam's accident. I was still processing this discovery when Liam entered the room, catching me with the box in hand. "I found that yesterday," he said quietly. "It doesn't match the ring Vanessa claims I gave her." "No, it doesn't," I agreed. "I think I was planning to break our engagement." He took the box, examining the ring thoughtfully. "This feels right in a way nothing else from my supposed past does." "Liam, there's something I need to tell you about our marriage." A knock interrupted us. The housekeeper announced that Liam's neurologist had arrived for his scheduled evaluation. "We'll continue this later," Liam promised, squeezing my hand before leaving. During his appointment, I returned to his study, determined to find more evidence about his relationship with Vanessa. Behind a row of books, I discovered a hidden wall safe I hadn't noticed before. Using the date from the ring as a potential combination, I was stunned when the safe clicked open. Inside was a USB drive labeled Vanessa Sinclair Evidence and legal documents appearing to be a draft of a prenuptial agreement with extensive fraud clauses. Also inside was a small recorder. With trembling fingers, I pressed play and heard Vanessa's voice clearly discussing moving funds from company accounts to offshore holdings. "Liam will never know," she told an unidentified man. "By the time the auditors catch on, we'll be married and I'll have access to everything." The recording confirmed my worst fears. Vanessa hadn't just been embezzling, she had been planning a larger scheme, and Liam had discovered it before his accident. I heard footsteps approaching and quickly returned everything to the safe except the USB drive, which I slipped into my pocket. When the door opened, I turned to find not Liam, but Vanessa. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Looking for something?" she asked, closing the door behind her. "Something to turn Liam against me, perhaps." The predatory gleam in her eye made me realize I was trapped in a room with someone who had already attempted murder once, and this time she had caught me with the evidence. I took a step back as Vanessa advanced, her designer heels clicking methodically on the hardwood floor. The USB drive felt heavy in my pocket, incriminating evidence I couldn't let her discover. "I was looking for some family photos," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Liam wanted to see pictures from before the accident." "How convenient," Vanessa replied, her smile not reaching her eyes. "And yet here you are in his private study, near his safe." "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied, glancing toward the door. "I should check on Liam. His appointment should be finishing." She moved with surprising speed, blocking my path. "Do you think I'm stupid, Elena? I've seen how you look at him, how you've manipulated this situation to your advantage." "I haven't manipulated anything. I've only tried to help him recover. Please." She rolled her eyes. "You've always wanted what I have. Even as children, you'd take my discarded toys, my hand-me-downs, pretending they were enough. But Liam isn't something you can have just because I'm temporarily inconvenienced." Her words stung with familiar pain. I had always been the afterthought, the consolation prize. But not with Liam. With him, for the first time, I felt valued. "He isn't a possession, Vanessa. He's a person who deserves the truth." Her expression hardened. "And what truth would that be? That his devoted fiancé, who stood by him through his business troubles, suddenly isn't good enough because his amnesia-addled mind is confused by your constant presence." "Business troubles you caused by embezzling millions," I countered, unable to maintain the pretense. Vanessa's face paled momentarily before her composure returned. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't I? Liam was gathering evidence against you before his accident. That's why he was on that coastal road, wasn't it? He was planning to confront you." She laughed, the sound brittle. "You have quite an imagination. Liam and I had a minor disagreement about investment strategies, nothing more. When his memory returns, he'll remember who truly belongs at his side." The door opened, and we both turned to see Mrs. Harrington standing there, her shrewd gaze taking in the tension between us. "Elena, Liam is asking for you. The doctor has some encouraging news." Her tone left no room for argument. I slipped past Vanessa, feeling her eyes burning into my back as I left. The neurologist was explaining Liam's progress when I entered his room. The brain scans show increased activity in the memory centers. I believe we'll see significant improvement soon, possibly triggered by emotional stimuli. "Like the kiss," Liam said, his eyes finding mine. I blushed as the doctor looked between us with professional interest. Precisely. Strong emotional connections can break through amnesia barriers, continue with activities that feel meaningful to you. After the doctor left, Liam took my hand. "I remembered something when we kissed. Just fragments, but something about a book you were reading to me. The Count of Monte Cristo. Was that real?" My heart leapt. "Yes, I read it to you while you were in the coma." "So we did have a connection before my accident?" I hesitated, knowing the moment of truth had arrived. Before I could respond, there was a commotion in the hallway. My father's voice carried through the door, arguing with Mrs. Harrington. "This charade has gone on long enough," he insisted as they entered the room. "Liam deserves to know the truth about this so-called marriage." My stomach dropped. After Vanessa must have called him, knowing he would destroy what Liam and I were building. "Elena?" Liam looked at me questioningly. I took a deep breath. "My father's right. There's something you need to know about our marriage." "She married you while you were unconscious," my father interjected. "It was a business arrangement to secure the merger when Vanessa was unavailable. There was never any relationship between you." I watched as confusion, then hurt crossed Liam's face. "Is this true?" "Yes," I admitted, my voice small. "But it's not that simple." "It seems very simple." He cut me off, his tone suddenly formal. "Our marriage was a transaction, a business deal while I was incapacitated." "The marriage can be annulled," my father continued, pressing his advantage. "Vanessa is willing to forgive this unfortunate situation and honor your original engagement." Liam's expression hardened. "I'd like everyone to leave. I need to process this." Mrs. Harrington guided my father out, murmuring something about contacting their lawyers. I lingered, desperate to explain. "Liam, please let me explain. What started as an arrangement became something real for me." "Did you ever plan to tell me?" he asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Yes, I tried several times. I was going to tell you today before Vanessa interrupted us in the study. He looked away. I need time, Elena. I don't know what to believe anymore. Heart aching, I left him alone. In the hallway, Vanessa waited with a triumphant smile. You should pack your things, she suggested sweetly. Once the lawyers arrive, your presence will only complicate matters. I ignored her, heading to my room where I immediately connected the USB drive to my laptop. The files confirmed everything. Detailed records of Vanessa's embezzlement, time-stamped the week before Liam's accident. There were also drafts of emails to his lawyer terminating his engagement to Vanessa, citing irreconcilable ethical differences. A soft knock at my door revealed Mrs. Harrington. May I come in? She surveyed the financial data on my screen with grim satisfaction. I see you found his evidence. Liam came to me with suspicions just before the accident. I told him to gather proof before confronting Vanessa. He was planning to end their engagement, I said, showing her the email drafts, and now she's manipulating him again, using your arranged marriage against you. Mrs. Harrington's expression softened unexpectedly. You love my son, don't you? I nodded, unable to deny it. Then fight for him, Elena. I've watched you care for him with more devotion than Vanessa ever showed. Don't let her rewrite history when his memory returns. Her support gave me strength, but as I heard Vanessa's laughter drifting up from Liam's room, I wondered if I had already lost the battle for his heart. I spent a sleepless night reviewing the evidence against Vanessa, preparing to show Liam the truth about his former fiancé. But when morning came, I discovered he had already left for a day trip with Vanessa to their supposed favorite coastal retreat. Mrs. Harrington informed me that lawyers would be arriving that afternoon to discuss the annulment. She's moving quickly, Mrs. Harrington observed. She knows his memories could return at any moment. I nodded, feeling hollow. I need to talk to him before the lawyers arrive. Give him space today. He feels betrayed, but Liam has always valued truth. When he calms down, he'll listen. I used the day to compile the evidence into a clear presentation, organizing financial records and the recorded conversations. The work helped distract me from the ache in my chest, the fear that I had lost something precious before it had truly begun. As evening approached, I heard cars in the driveway. Peering through the window, I saw Liam helping Vanessa from the car, her hand resting possessively on his arm. Behind them, another car delivered 3 stern-looking individuals carrying briefcases. The lawyers, right on schedule. I retreated to my room, unable to watch Vanessa orchestrate the dissolution of our marriage. An hour later, a knock on my door revealed one of the lawyers, requesting my presence in the study. I gathered my evidence and followed him downstairs, heart pounding. The study was crowded. Liam sat behind his desk, looking exhausted. Vanessa perched beside him, triumphant. My parents stood near the window, avoiding my gaze. Mrs. Harrington sat rigidly in an armchair, her expression unreadable. Mrs. Harrington, one lawyer began, we're here to discuss the annulment of your marriage to Mr. Harrington, given the circumstances under which it was performed. Liam's eyes met mine briefly before looking away. The connection we had built over weeks of recovery seemed severed. Before we proceed, I said, setting my laptop on the desk, there are facts Mr. Harrington should be aware of regarding his former engagement to Vanessa Sinclair. Vanessa stiffened. This is inappropriate. Elena is clearly bitter about— Let her speak, Liam interrupted, surprising everyone. I connected my laptop to the room's display screen and began presenting the evidence. Transaction records showing funds diverted from Liam's company to offshore accounts controlled by Vanessa, recorded conversations where she discussed her plans with an unnamed accomplice, and finally, Liam's own draft emails terminating their engagement. You were planning to end your relationship with Vanessa before your accident, I explained. You discovered her embezzlement and were gathering evidence to confront her. Vanessa launched from her seat. This is absurd. She's fabricated all of this out of jealousy. Actually, Mrs. Harrington interjected, Liam shared his suspicions with me before the accident. These are his own files, his own investigation. My father stepped forward, his business instincts overriding family loyalty. Are you suggesting my daughter was stealing from Harrington Industries? $2 million, I confirmed, and I believe she may have been involved in Liam's accident when he planned to confront her. The room erupted in chaos. Vanessa vehemently denied everything. My parents demanded explanations, and the lawyers whispered urgently among themselves. Through it all, Liam remained silent, his eyes fixed on the financial evidence displayed on the screen. Finally, he stood, commanding the room's attention. I need to speak with Elena alone. Protests rose, particularly from Vanessa, but Liam was unmovable. One by one, they filed out until only Liam and I remained in the study. I remembered something today, he said quietly. At the coastal house, standing on the same balcony where Vanessa said I proposed, I had a flash of memory. I wasn't there with her. I was alone, calling someone to tell them I had evidence of financial fraud and wanted to meet. Hope flickered within me. Do you remember who you called? My lawyer, he confirmed. I remember driving afterward, thinking about how to handle the confrontation with Vanessa, then nothing until waking up with you beside my hospital bed. I took a deep breath. Liam, I need to tell you the whole truth about our marriage. His expression softened. I already know most of it. My mother explained while you were compiling your evidence. Our families arranged it while I was comatose to secure the merger and protect my assets. Yes, I admitted. But what started as an arrangement became real for me. Reading to you, caring for you, getting to know you through your books and your home. I fell in love with you before you ever opened your eyes. Liam moved closer, taking my hands in his. And after I woke up with no memory of who I was supposed to be, I fell in love with you too. That's why the revelation hurt so much. I thought what we had was the one authentic thing in my life. It is authentic, I insisted. My feelings for you are the most honest thing about me. He touched my cheek gently. I believe you, and I believe this evidence. Vanessa's behavior since I woke up has felt manipulative and false, while everything with you feels right. Relief washed over me. So what happens now? Now, he said with newfound determination, we deal with Vanessa and this annulment nonsense. Then we decide what we want our marriage to be, starting from a place of truth. The door opened, revealing a flustered lawyer. Mr. Harrington, there's a situation. Miss Sinclair has become hysterical and is making accusations about both you and Elena. The police are on their way. Liam sighed. It seems Vanessa doesn't surrender easily. Together we walked out to face whatever came next, his hand firmly holding mine, a united front against the storm Vanessa was sure to unleash. For the first time since our unusual marriage began, I felt like a true partner, rather than a substitute or caretaker. Whatever happened next, we would face it together. The scene in the grand foyer was chaos. Vanessa was in full meltdown, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face as she pointed accusingly at me. She's been poisoning him against me, she shouted to the two police officers who stood awkwardly in the marble entryway. She married him while he was unconscious, and now she's fabricating evidence to turn him against me. My parents hovered uncertainly near the staircase, clearly torn between family loyalty and the damning evidence they had just witnessed. Mrs. Harrington maintained her composure, addressing the officers with the practiced authority of someone accustomed to managing crises. Officers, I apologize for this disturbance. My son's former fiancé is upset about recent revelations regarding financial irregularities at his company. One officer, a middle-aged woman with shrewd eyes, seemed unimpressed by the mansion's grandeur. We received a call about accusations of fraud and possible attempted murder. That's not exactly a family squabble." Liam stepped forward, still holding my hand. "I'm Liam Harrington. I was involved in a car accident several months ago that left me in a coma. Since awakening, I've been dealing with amnesia while trying to piece together what happened before my accident." "And you believe someone tampered with your car?" the officer asked. "We have evidence suggesting Miss Sinclair may have been involved," I said, indicating my laptop. "Financial records show she was embezzling from Mr. Harrington's company. He discovered this shortly before his accident." Vanessa's composure cracked further. "This is ridiculous. You can't possibly believe these accusations." The female officer looked between us. "I think we need to continue this conversation at the station. This appears to involve potential criminal matters beyond our initial call." What followed was hours of statements, evidence review, and tense waiting. Vanessa maintained her innocence, but her story began unraveling when confronted with the financial records and voice recordings. The police were particularly interested in her whereabouts the day of Liam's accident. "I was at a charity luncheon," she insisted. "Dozens of people saw me there." "The accident occurred at 8:30 p.m., the detective noted. "The luncheon ended at 2 p.m., according to the event coordinator we just spoke with." As the questioning continued, Liam experienced another memory flash, a crucial piece of the puzzle. He remembered stopping at a gas station just before the accident and seeing a reflection in his rearview mirror, someone in the back seat of his car who shouldn't have been there. "I turned around," he recounted slowly, "and saw someone crouching behind the driver's seat. Then something struck my head. The accident wasn't an accident at all." The detective leaned forward. "Can you identify who was in your car?" Liam closed his eyes, concentrating. "It was dark, but I remember catching a glimpse of a custom bracelet, a gold serpent with emerald eyes." All eyes turned to Vanessa's wrist, where that exact bracelet glinted in the fluorescent station lights. She instinctively covered it, eyes wide with realization. "That doesn't prove anything," she said, but her voice had lost its conviction. The investigation shifted rapidly after Liam's statement. Police obtained a warrant to search Vanessa's apartment, where they discovered the burner phone she had used to coordinate with an accomplice, her personal trainer, as it turned out, with whom she had been having an affair. Text messages revealed their plan: stage an accident that would either kill Liam or leave him incapacitated long enough for Vanessa to secure control of his assets through marriage. When Liam had discovered her embezzlement and threatened to end their engagement, she accelerated their timeline. What she hadn't anticipated was my family's desperate financial situation coinciding with her crime, leading to our unexpected marriage and derailing her scheme. While the police built their case, Liam's memories continued returning in fragments. Most were business-related, but some were deeply personal, confirming his growing disillusionment with Vanessa in the weeks before his accident and his decision to end their engagement. "I remember thinking she wasn't who I thought she was," he told me as we sat in the garden one evening, a week after Vanessa's questioning. "I was going to break it off the weekend of the accident. I even bought a bottle of her favorite champagne to soften the blow." "That's very considerate for someone breaking off an engagement," I observed. He smiled ruefully. "I always hated confrontation. I wanted to be fair, even though I suspected she was stealing from me. I hadn't confirmed the extent of it yet." As Liam's memory improved, so did his physical condition. The doctors were amazed by his recovery, attributing it to his determination and the consistent care he had received. "You're a miracle case, Mr. Harrington," his neurologist declared during a follow-up visit. "Few patients recover so completely from such severe trauma." While Liam flourished, my relationship with my family deteriorated further. My parents, faced with Vanessa's crimes, still somehow blamed me for the situation. "If you had refused the arrangement, none of this would have happened," my mother insisted during a tense phone call. "Now your sister faces criminal charges because you couldn't stay in your place." "My place?" I echoed incredulously. You mean the place where I sacrifice everything for Vanessa's benefit? She was going to provide for all of us, my father interjected. Her marriage to Liam would have secured our future. Her marriage was built on theft and nearly became murder, I countered, and you're still defending her. I ended the call feeling both liberated and heartbroken. My family's conditional love had always hinged on my usefulness to their plans. Now that I had found my own path, they couldn't accept it. Liam found me on the terrace afterward, tears streaming down my face. Without a word, he sat beside me and pulled me close. "They'll never see me as anything but a poor substitute for Vanessa," I whispered against his shoulder. "Then they're fools," he replied simply, "because I remember enough now to know that you're not a substitute for anyone. You're exactly who I need." His words were a balm to my wounded heart. As the police investigation continued and Vanessa's case headed toward prosecution, Liam and I focused on rebuilding his health, his company, and our relationship. The marriage that had begun as a business arrangement was transforming into something genuine and deeply valuable to us both. But we still had one final confrontation ahead, one that would test everything we had built together. The preliminary hearing for Vanessa's case was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, 3 months after Liam had awakened from his coma. I dressed carefully in a simple navy dress, wanting to project composure despite my churning anxiety. This would be the first time I would face my sister since her arrest, and the first time Liam would confront her with his fully returned memories. "Are you ready?" Liam asked, adjusting his tie in our bedroom mirror. His recovery had been remarkable. Only a slight limp remained as evidence of his trauma, and his memories had largely returned, though some details remained permanently lost. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, smoothing my hair. "I just want this chapter closed so we can move forward." He crossed the room and took my hands in his. "Whatever happens today, remember that we're in this together." The courthouse was crowded with reporters, eager to document the sensational case. The Harrington name guaranteed media attention, and the story had all the elements of a tabloid dream: wealth, betrayal, attempted murder, and unexpected romance. We were ushered into a private waiting area where the district attorney briefed us on the proceedings. Vanessa had been charged with embezzlement, attempted murder, and conspiracy. Her personal trainer and accomplice, Marco, had accepted a plea deal in exchange for testifying against her. "She's trying to negotiate a deal," the DA informed us. "Her attorney has approached us about reducing charges if she makes full restitution of the embezzled funds." Liam's expression hardened. "The money isn't my concern. She tried to kill me and would have succeeded if not for pure luck. I want her prosecuted to the fullest extent." When we entered the courtroom, my parents were seated behind Vanessa, presenting a united front of family support. Their eyes met mine briefly before sliding away, their disappointment and resentment palpable across the room. Mrs. Harrington, who had become my unexpected ally, squeezed my hand reassuringly as we took our seats. Vanessa appeared transformed by her time in detention. Her designer clothes were replaced by a modest suit, her makeup minimal, her previously perfect hair pulled back severely. She had cultivated a look of vulnerable innocence, but when she turned to look at us, her eyes betrayed her true feelings: cold hatred directed primarily at me. The hearing proceeded with formal charges being read and initial evidence presented. Vanessa pleaded not guilty to all charges, her voice steady and clear. Her attorney portrayed her as a victim of manipulation by her trainer, suggesting she had been coerced into the financial crimes and knew nothing of the attempted murder plan. During a recess, I stepped into the hallway for air and found myself suddenly cornered by my mother. "This is your last chance to do the right thing," she hissed. "Convince Liam to accept the deal. Your sister doesn't deserve prison." I stared at her in disbelief. "She tried to kill my husband, Mother. She stole millions from his company. How can you still defend her?" "Because she's family," my mother insisted. "Something you seem to have forgotten." "No, I haven't forgotten what family means, but I've learned it should mean loyalty and love, not blind support of criminal behavior. My father appeared beside her. "You've always been jealous of Vanessa. Now you've taken everything from her." "I didn't take anything," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Vanessa lost everything through her own actions, and you enabled her, just like you always have. Is everything all right?" Liam had emerged from the courtroom, his presence solid and reassuring beside me. My father's expression turned calculating. "Liam, surely you can see that a long public trial isn't in anyone's best interest. A financial settlement could resolve this quietly." "Mr. Sinclair," Liam responded coolly, "your daughter nearly killed me and would have left Elena a widow before our marriage had even truly begun. There will be no deals." He guided me away from my parents, who watched us go with bitter resignation. When the hearing resumed, Vanessa's attorney called for a brief conference with the judge and prosecutor. Something had changed. Minutes later, the judge announced that Vanessa wished to change her plea. The courtroom fell silent as Vanessa stood, her composure finally cracking. "I'd like to plead guilty to all charges," she said, her voice barely audible. Her attorney explained that she would provide full cooperation regarding the financial crimes and attempted murder conspiracy. In exchange, the prosecution would recommend a reduced sentence, though still substantial. As part of her statement, Vanessa was required to publicly admit her actions. She described in clinical detail how she had embezzled funds through fake vendor accounts, how she had planned Liam's accident when he discovered her theft, and how she had hidden in his car to strike him unconscious while driving. "And why did you return after his hospitalization?" the prosecutor asked. Vanessa's eyes found mine across the courtroom. "To maintain control of the situation. I needed to prevent his memory from returning and eliminate any evidence he might have gathered against me, including potentially harming your sister, who was now married to Mr. Harrington." She hesitated, then spoke with chilling honesty. "She was an unexpected complication. I considered several options for removing her from the situation permanently." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. My mother let out a muffled sob. Liam's hand tightened around mine. After the hearing concluded with the acceptance of Vanessa's guilty plea, we emerged from the courthouse into blinding camera flashes. Liam expertly guided me through the media gauntlet to our waiting car. "It's over," he said quietly as the car pulled away. "She can't hurt us anymore." I leaned against him, emotionally exhausted. "My family will never forgive me for this." "Your family made their choice," he replied. "They chose Vanessa despite everything she did. That's on them, not you." As we drove home, I realized that while one chapter had closed, another was just beginning. The truth had been revealed, justice would be served, and now Liam and I had the chance to build something authentic from our unusual beginning. But first, we needed to decide what we truly wanted from the marriage that had begun as an arrangement of convenience and become the most important relationship in both our lives. 2 months after Vanessa's hearing, life had settled into a new rhythm. Liam had returned to running his company, though with more delegation to trusted executives than before his accident. I had discovered a talent for financial analysis while investigating Vanessa's embezzlement and was now working alongside Liam's security team to implement stronger fraud prevention systems. The legal proceedings continued in the background of our lives, with Vanessa ultimately receiving a 15-year sentence for her crimes. My parents had made one last attempt to reconcile on their terms, suggesting I should forgive and support Vanessa, despite everything. When I refused, they cut contact completely. Though their rejection hurt, it also brought clarity. For the first time, I recognized the pattern of emotional manipulation that had defined our family dynamics. Breaking free of those expectations felt like shedding a weight I had carried my entire life. One evening, I found Liam in his study, examining a small velvet box, the same one that contained the ring he had purchased before his accident. "I remembered why I bought this," he said when he noticed me in the doorway. "It wasn't for Vanessa." I entered the room, curious. "Who was it for?" "No one specific," he admitted, opening the box to reveal the elegant ring. It was a promise to myself. After I discovered Vanessa's theft, I realized our entire relationship had been built on her manipulation. The ring represented my decision to start fresh, to find a relationship based on honesty when I was ready. He set the box on his desk, his expression contemplative. Our marriage began under unusual circumstances, to say the least, but these past months, building a real relationship with you, have been the most authentic connection I've ever had. My heart quickened at his words. Though we now shared a bed and a life, we had never formally discussed what our marriage meant beyond the initial arrangement. Both of us had been too focused on his recovery, Vanessa's case, and the restructuring of his company to address the fundamental question of our future. "I feel the same way," I said softly, "but I've wondered if you might eventually resent how this began, if you might want a clean start once everything is settled." Liam came to me, taking my hands in his. "Elena, nothing about our beginning was conventional, but what matters more to me is what we've built since then. You saw me at my most vulnerable. You fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself, and you showed me what true partnership means." He retrieved the ring box from the desk. I had an idea. Our first wedding was a business transaction, performed while I was unconscious. What if we had a second ceremony, one that represents the relationship we've actually chosen? Joy bubbled up inside me. "Are you proposing to your own wife?" He laughed, the sound warm and free. "I suppose I am. Elena Sinclair Harrington, will you marry me again, this time with both of us fully conscious and consenting?" I threw my arms around his neck. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." We planned a small ceremony in the estate's gardens, inviting only those who had supported our unusual journey. Mrs. Harrington, who had become more mother to me than my own, helped with the arrangements. Martin, the groundskeeper, ensured the gardenias Liam loved were in full bloom. Even Liam's formerly skeptical business partners had come to respect our partnership. On the morning of our vow renewal, I stood before the mirror in a dress I had chosen myself, so different from the cold white gown of our first wedding. This one was the color of sunrise, warm and full of promise. Mrs. Harrington appeared in the doorway. "You look beautiful, Elena." She approached, holding a small velvet box. "I want you to have this. It belonged to Liam's grandmother." Inside was a delicate diamond bracelet. "She was also an unconventional woman who married into this family," Mrs. Harrington explained as she fastened it around my wrist. "She would have approved of your strength." The ceremony was everything our first wedding wasn't. Joyful, intimate, and filled with genuine emotion. We wrote our own vows, acknowledging our unusual beginning, but focusing on the future we were choosing together. "From forced arrangement to genuine love," Liam promised. "I choose you every day, not out of obligation, but out of profound respect and devotion." "I once thought I was sacrificing myself for my family," I responded, only to discover I was finding my true home with you. Afterward, as we danced under the stars in the garden where I had once walked with a comatose man learning to take his first steps again, Liam held me close. "No more secrets between us," he murmured against my hair. "No more arranged expectations. Just us, building something real," I agreed. In the following months, we established our own traditions and rhythms. Liam's company thrived under our shared vision, implementing stronger ethical standards and oversight. I found purpose in developing financial literacy programs for young women, ensuring others would have the knowledge to protect themselves that I had lacked. On our first true anniversary, we returned to the conservatory where we had shared our first kiss. Liam had filled it with gardenias and candlelight. "I have something to tell you," I said as we sipped champagne among the flowers. "I've been working on a project of my own." I handed him the ultrasound picture I had received that morning. His eyes widened as he understood. "We're having a baby?" I nodded, happy tears threatening. In about 7 months, our family is growing." He gathered me carefully in his arms as though I had suddenly become fragile. I never imagined finding this kind of happiness after waking up to a world I couldn't remember. And I never imagined finding my worth after a lifetime of being the forgotten daughter, I replied. But here we are, proving that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful destinations. As we stood there, entwined in the warm glow of the conservatory, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us together. A desperate arrangement had transformed into the most authentic relationship either of us had ever known. The forgotten daughter had found her voice, her strength, and her true place in the world, not in her sister's shadow, but in the light of her own choosing.